Tim called this morning at 5 o'clock. He said he had a stomach virus or something. I wanted to know if I could preach. I said, well, I don't know. We tried to see. And I was studying this very passage when he called. Of course, most of you know my pattern for study is I'm not studying 5 subjects at one time. I'm usually studying one thing. And when I get that out of my blood, then I go on something else. Well, lately, as I have preached here 2 or 3 times on Sunday nights, it's the life of Jacob, or some segments in the life of Jacob, and doing more of a practical study, even though we're not bending or changing the historical setting, but taking those to get some practical lessons from the life of Jacob. So today we'll be in Genesis chapter 25. And I've been having a little eye trouble. I traveled up to North Carolina recently, week before last, went up to the Preaching Missions Conference. And that right eye gave me so much trouble going up. I guess maybe light sensitive or whatever. But anyway, I thought, boy, I'm not going to be able to find a doctor. Maybe I can go to Walmart and find some kind of a drops that I hadn't been using, lubricant for dry eye. And when I got there, they said, well, the doctor's in. I said, let me see him. So went around the corner, and there was a doctor there, Dr. Smith. Turned out to be a Christian fella. I witnessed to him and just had a real good witness. But anyway, I got some help. And but during the week, it was blurry. I couldn't hardly read the text, couldn't hardly read the verses. And so I said, I'll just tell you the story and trust you to believe me. And you can check your references. Well, I may have to do some of that today. So, but it's a good idea, to be no more noble than those who read. Check the scriptures, see whether those things be so or not. But I may have to do that. We'll see. If I can read, we'll be all right. If I can't, we'll still be okay. And but anyway, that's where we'll be in a few minutes. Let me say, before I read these verses, that I think the most important meeting of the year is coming up just in 2 weeks and a half. It'll be Faith Promise Missions Conference. Now, you probably, most of you, don't feel the same intensity toward missions as somebody that's involved in it. That's my life, missions. I'm not on a mission field, a foreign field, but that's what we live for. We live to get Bibles printed, get them on a mission field, try to do our best to fulfill the Great Commission. And so that's a very integral part of my life. And it ought to be of everybody's. It's to get in the gospel of Christ out. And I've given testimony here before that I used to listen to Billy Allen. I preached with him for several years in the Shady Acre Baptist Church there in Houston. And Brother Billy's gone to be with the Lord. But anyway, that was his life. And Billy Allen would say, I would hate to have anything on my budget bigger than my Faith Promise mission giving. That kind of stung me a little bit. And he would say, I'd hate to have a mortgage payment that was more than my mission giving. I'd hate to have a car payment that was more than my mission giving. And that bothered me, and I kept working on it. We got it up there. And now we finally got the mission giving up to where we've never had any kind of a payment as big as our Faith Promise missions giving. And but really, giving, it just shows how good God's been to you. What hast thou that thou didst not receive? I mean, you come into this world, you don't have anything when you got here. You won't have anything when you go out. And recently, the issue of how much should my tithe be? Well, if you're living back over in that Old Testament, a tithe, that's 10%. That was a law. Now, it wasn't a law when the first man started doing it. He just saw what God did for him. So I believe I'll start tithing. I'm going to give 10% of everything. Then it became a law. And they did it. But in the New Testament, what do? It's not a reflection of your obedience to the law. It's a reflection of your love for Christ. So people who work public jobs or whatever, or you're on retirement, whatever, you got an income. And so we have the discussion, should I tithe off the gross of the net? What's the answer to that? How much do you want God to have? You tithe off the number that God will get the most money from. I mean, okay? You tithe out of your love for God, and folks that account it, to the penny and whatever, Now you need an adjustment in your attitude. I can't do it. I can't give you the adjustment. But what should you tithe on? Tithe on the biggest figure you come up with. You know, what do you want him to have? How much do you love Christ? Now then, after you've tithed, you get in this matter of faith, promise, mission giving. Now let me tell you how it works, okay? And I used to be a little bit intimidated, afraid if you tell people what you're giving, they think you're bragging, or they think you're a skin plant, one of the two. They'll judge you one way or another. So that don't make any difference any longer. But here, 3 or 4 years ago, well, the Lord spoke to my heart 3 or 4 months before mission conference time about my commitment for missions following year. And when he did, when it came mission conference time, we just put it on the card, put it in the plate. And I was sure that's what he said do. And so we did it. Now, we've been able to get our Faith Promise Mission Conference, or Faith Promise Missions commitment, double what our tithe is. Who says that's a lot of money? Well, I didn't tell you how much it was. You know, my tithe may not be but $20 a month, for all you know. But wasn't that a blessing? That, you know, you tithe your income, give to missions, just say you'll starve to death. Let me tell you how it works, okay? Week before last, I was in that conference in North Carolina, and I've preached that missions conference every year for several years. And every year, that faith promise has gone up. The church probably 75, 80 people maybe. But they've got the same crowd every year. They don't lose. They're not growing leaps and bounds, but they're a mission-minded church. And so this year, their commitment went about 17% above last year. But when they took their last offering, their last mission offering for their faith promise commitment last year, it came up $1,380 short, I believe. Well, every year that church gives me the same amount of a love offering for preaching. Every year, same amount. So I know what it's going to be. Now, if it wasn't anything, it's fine to me. I'll pay more expenses and go without an offering. But it's every year. And I think the reason that it's an even amount and it's a very generous offering is because I'm sure what they take in the plate during the week doesn't reach that amount. So they add to it and make it that good amount. And so you know what it's going to be. But this year, when I preached the last service of the Faith Promise Conference, and they took their last offering, their Faith Promise commitment for last year, they came up $1,380 short. Well, I got up to preach, and I said, you know, I don't think we'll let that happen. And I said, I'll give $1,000. I mean, if somebody, you just need another $380, and I'll call my wife and tell her in the morning, put a check in the mail for $1,000, and you just need another $380. Well, the preacher, he jumped up and gave $500, and then somebody else come down and give something else, and somebody something else, and the first thing you know, I don't know how much they was over, but they went over. That was a blessing, wasn't it? But when they gave me my love offering, it was $1,000 more than it ever was. You know? So what do? You're trying to outgive each other. At the same time, Jason Kennedy was standing up giving $1,000 here, same night. Just, I was probably a little before him, because there it's an hour in front of you. And so Jason was giving $1,000 to help with the Rwanda project. And then you folks give enough money to put that other church, another church, I believe, through Brother Stark, up on the mission field. You know, that's funny how it works. And you just give, and it just comes back. You give, and it comes back. Give, and it comes back. And then Brother Tony Smith went out to Houston last Sunday night. He told some things about the Rwanda work. And Danny Farley of their church took an offering and gave another $15,700 for that. And so you've already got the money for one, you got the money for another one. You know, what do you need? You need somebody that's willing. Of course, I guess you got to do it through those nationals, through Rwanda. But that money's already in an account for Brother Stark to do work in Rwanda. So that's the way it works. You just give, you keep giving. He said, I'm saving mine. Help yourself, it's yours. Ain't nobody can tell you what to do with your money, but you're going to have a red face in the judgment seat of Christ. Amen. You know, and how do you tell my heart? It's where you put your money. That's what the Bible said. Isn't that right? I mean, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Doesn't say where your heart is, there will your treasure be, but where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And so we don't regret. And you say, well, how you doing financially? I don't have a need in the world. Not a need. And my wife takes care of the money. I haven't had a financial report in 25 years. But there are no bill collectors. We're not, ain't nobody, you know. Of course, we took the phone out, so somebody might be trying to, they might be trying to call, but we didn't have any use for a land phone. Amen. Amen. But you know, what's the objective of the Christian life? Well, I'll tell you the main purpose of the Christian life. I mean, once you're born again, it's to worship God. And that's not just Sunday mornings. We often say we worship God through a tithe and offering. You worship God through everything you do, everywhere you go, everything you say. See, total consecration, what's that mean? Me, all that I have or ever hope to be is for His glory and His service. That's Christian life. And you know what our job is? It's to evangelize the whole world. Get the gospel to the entire world. Amen. And so, I don't know, I haven't heard from the Lord yet of what He'll have us to do this year in Faith Promise, but He never has said cut it back. Never has. It's kind of like Billy Allen, the preacher that put me under conviction about that stuff, would say, every time he prays and said, Lord, what will you have me to do? It's like he's got a record and hit the button that says more. More. You know, there's a message a lot of fellows have preached when Hannah, she couldn't have children. She prayed, Lord gave her a man-child. Of course, that was little Samuel. She took him up to the temple and gave him to the Lord. Now, the reason she did that was because that's where the need was. Eli had two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. They were not doing what they were supposed to do in the office of priesthood. So what needed to be done up at the temple? They needed a man-child. And that's the way she prayed. She said, if you give me a man-child, said, I'll give him to you all the days of his life. So that was her faith promise. She trusted God. He gave it. She gave the boy. And but you know what happened in that scenario there in the book of Samuel? She went up every year and gave that boy a little coat. So she only gave faith promise once, but she added to it every year. That boy was her faith promise. That little coat was in addition to that. And you know what? Her faith promise had to get bigger every year. Was that little boy growing? Could I say it like this? There was more to cover. You think there's more to cover this year than there was last year? I believe we've got more to cover. The coat's got to get bigger. By the way, you know, when you read that scenario there in the book of Samuel, it's kind of humorous, but she said she'll give him to the Lord. And then she changed her tune for us over and said he should be lent unto the Lord. But she never did take him back. What's the difference in a gift and a loan? A loan pays interest. And you know what? When Hannah, when she gave that boy, even Eli the priest said, Lord, give her children for this child she's given. And he did. He gave her 5. You know what that is? That's 500% interest. Now, you're not going to get that in any bank or stocks. You're not going to get 500% interest anywhere in the world. But she got a 500% interest on her faith promise. Amen. Well, I'm looking forward to this year's Faith Promise Conference. That's going to be good. Amen. All right, let's try to read in Genesis 25. In Genesis chapter number 25, verse 19 through 20. And we read, and these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Syrian. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. And the children struggled together within her, and she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment. And they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel. And his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare him. And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Jacob. Now that's the man that's in our studies, but we'll look at another creature here in a few minutes. But when somebody makes their way into the Bible, and maybe they're in a good family, maybe they know other good people, maybe they've got good relatives, whatever, maybe they've got an easy name, a good name. But don't always just take somebody because they're there and assume that's a great person. You know, and Brother Bert, that was good this morning, that God loved Jacob, hated Esau. And that's exactly right. That's what he said. But, you know, we can look at Jacob. Of course, he's one of the patriarchs, the progenitor of the Hebrew race. We think, great guy. But to tell you the truth about it, when I studied the life of Jacob, at least before he met the Lord in one of those divine encounters, I don't know of a more deceptive, crooked, self-centered individual anywhere in the world. I mean, he's just about as sorry as you could think of a person being. And the only one thing that I know that Jacob had going for him was that God loved him. I mean, that's it. God loved him. That's what the Bible said, that God loved Jacob. Now, here's a question. What made Jacob like he was? Boy, it's humiliating to all of us. But the thing that made Jacob like he was is the same thing that makes you and I like we are. You know what Jacob had? Jacob had an Adamic nature. And he got it from our forefather Adam, who disobeyed God and fell. And that nature, that Adamic nature, is in you and it's in me. Now here's a verse that's just got one phrase in it I'd like for you to think about. But the Bible said in 2 Samuel 14:14, for we must needs die, and we are as water spilt on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Now what's water spilled on the ground? What's the deal? If you have water in any kind of a container, it's in a glass or a bottle or whatever, you have water with restrictions. It's got a retainer. It's got something holding it in check. But you take that away and let the water spill on the ground, and you know what it'll do? If you take that away, water will reduce itself to its lowest level, and it cannot be gathered up again. So that's what humanity is like. You're like water spilled on the ground. And if you take the retainers away, if you take the thing that's holding human nature in check away, you know what human nature will do? It'll reduce itself to its lowest level. Why? Because that's human nature. And what we do, we look at one better than another, one worse than another. But let me tell you, do you know what? Here a few years back, you had those terrorists flew the airplanes into the Trade Center. You know what made them do that? The same thing that made a little kid cheat on a test in school. Same thing. You know what made a teenage boy get rebellious and run to the world and, you know, have his fling in the world? The same thing that made Al Capone a criminal. It's the same thing. Now, some people have more restrictions on them, and that Adamic nature doesn't run as wild as it does with others, but it's still the same thing. So what made Jacob like he was is the very same thing that makes people abort their baby. Same thing. The thing that made Jacob like he was is the same thing that made a kid steal a cookie. It's the same thing. See? And when we preach against sin, the Bible declares that we're to make it exceeding sinful. So it doesn't matter who it is. In fact, a little old girl one time, she was in our church, and she came to me crying. She said, Brother Fellure, and she was in tears. I mean, she was just in tears. And boy, I began to talk with her, and I said, well, what's wrong? And after a while, she sobbed it out. She said, in the youth rally last week, I held hands with a boy. You know, you can have a kid sitting in church today. In fact, used to be one sitting right over here about 20 years ago, and fornicating, shacking up. The boy had an abortion 3 or 4 months later, never used the altar, never got under conviction. But that other little girl, she got under conviction because she held hands with the boy in a youth rally. Hey. And you know what you're to do? You're supposed to preach against holding hands with the boys in the youth rally. You're supposed to make sin appear exceedingly sinful. However, let's leave that. Jacob was just manifesting the fact that he had an Adamic nature. But what made him like he was? Do you know in particular areas you will be like your ancestors? You'll be like your dad, be like your mother, you'll be like your family, you'll be like your father, be like your grandfather. And you know, it's an interesting thing to me that Jacob's grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac both married beautiful women. In fact, it said concerning Abraham's wife Sarah that she was fair. That means beautiful. She was fair to look upon. And then in verse 14 of Genesis 12, it said that she was very fair. She was exceedingly beautiful. So that was Abraham's wife Sarah. And then Isaac's wife Rebekah, the one that we've read about here, when Abraham's eldest servant went over to get Rebekah as a wife for Isaac, the Bible said in Genesis chapter 24 and verse 16 that the damsel, that is Rebekah, was very exceedingly fair, beautiful to look upon. And so Abraham, he married a beautiful wife. Isaac, he married a beautiful woman. So what would you expect Jacob to do? I mean, that just kind of run in the family. And when it was time for Jacob to get a wife, he went over and Rachel came out. And when Rachel came out, he saw her. She was very fair to look upon. And so he ended up marrying Rachel. He loved her so much that he spent 14 years to get her. And so, you know, that was in the family. And then without turning to the verses, if you go back to the book of Genesis, chapter number 12, before you get out of the chapter that introduced the life of Abraham, you find him lying about his wife. Said, she's my sister. And then you get a little later on in the Bible, and you find Isaac doing the same thing. He's lying about his wife. And then you get into the passage that we've studied already, and we'll study later on more so, that, you know what, when Jacob wanted to deceive his father, he already lied to him. Abraham was a liar, Isaac was a liar, Jacob was a liar. I don't know what you are, but don't be surprised if your son and your daughter don't turn out with some of your traits. They liable to do the same thing that you did. Now, another thing that you want to look at is the words in the Bible and their meaning in order to determine the character of the individual. I don't know how it worked, and I don't know how those Jews especially knew, but when they would name a baby, they'd give that baby a name, for he shall. And the name depicted what he's going to do when he got old. There's no way in the world you could do that today unless God spoke to you and said, no, call him such and such, for he shall. You'd have to have the mind of God in order to do that. And yet that is a Bible principle. If you look at their name, find out what it means, that's probably what they're going to be when they get old. Let me just give you 3 examples. But for instance, Noah. And you know what it said of Noah? That he should comfort us in our toil. And the word Noah means rest. And so they named him what he would be when he became an adult, and he was. And then Joseph, for instance, when Rachel gave birth to Joseph, they named him Joseph because she said, I'll have another child. And the word Joseph means to add to. See? So the very name. If you go to Matthew 1, you'll find the word Jesus. The Lord said, no, call him Jesus, for what? He shall save his people from their sins. And Jesus means Jehovah is salvation. All right, let's pick out a real good character here in the Bible and see if we can find out from this person some of Jacob's problems. And who's his mother? It's Rebekah. That's a wonderful lady, beautiful lady, married to Isaac, mother of Jacob. Had to be a great woman. But if you look at the meaning of her name, it means ensnare. To ensnare means to entangle in difficulties, to entrap, to beguile, or to lure. She knew how to trip you up. That was what her name meant. Now, when the proposal, and you forgive me for not turning these verses, but believe me, they're here. But when the proposal came for Rebekah to be Isaac's wife, all right, now Abraham takes his eldest servant. He takes Eleazar, he sends him to get Rebekah. Now, I'm sure, knowing that what Abraham had married a beautiful woman, and now Isaac, he's probably somehow let Eliezer know, don't bring a mud ball back to me. I want a beautiful woman, okay? And so when that servant went over there, and Rebekah came out to the well, when she came out, she's beautiful. And that servant began to talk to Rebekah about marriage. Now, as far as I can tell, this is the first proposal she's ever had. She jumped on the first offer. But what made her jump on that offer? When Eliezer went over there and Rebekah came out there and he talked for a minute and gave her a kiss and cried over it. It must have been some doozy. But anyway, that's what happened. And then he put a earring on her of so many weights of gold and bracelets on her wrist of so many weights of gold. And I checked the figures the best I could. You know what? That one earring and those bracelets that he put on, that's about $10,000 worth of jewelry. So all of a sudden, Rebekah has a proposal to go live with a man. And by the way, after he put that bracelet on her and put that earring on her, about $10,000 worth, then, you know what he said? He said, my master is a wealthy man, so the Lord has blessed him. He's got camels, he's got sheep, he's got oxen, he's got all this stuff. He's a wealthy man, but he hath given it all to his son. And so the idea is that whoever marries his son, that's what you're going to have. You're going to be filthy rich. And he showed her all that jewelry, buddy. She jumped at the chance. Now, I know the type. I know you can get another type out of it, that God the Father, Abraham, he's got everything. He gave it to his son, Jesus Christ, typified by Isaac, and we're the bride, and we're going to get it. We're heirs of God, and joint heirs with Jesus Christ, and I know that. But that wasn't what Rebekah was thinking. That's what I'm thinking, but she wasn't thinking that. Boy, she saw the glitter of all that jewelry, and then she saw that this mighty man of wealth. And then before it's over with, he sweetened the pot. And once he had talked to her daddy, and they brought the damsel out there, he said to the daddy, we've got raiment. So that's a wardrobe, clothes. And if you want to lure any woman in the world, you can do it with beautiful clothes, a lot of jewelry, and the hopes you're going to have a lot of money in the future. And that's exactly what Rebekah saw. And so they said, let's let you make the choice. They normally didn't do that in the Old Testament. Women, the men, they made the choice. But they said, will you go with this man? She said, I will go. She didn't have to pray about it. She didn't have to think about it. She didn't have to do it. He said, if you marry that boy, you're going to get everything daddy's got. See this jewelry, millions of dollars worth, no doubt. You're going to get it all. See the clothes. You're going to dress in the finest, buddy. And she fell for it. She went for it. You say that people do that? Hey, people marry for all kinds of reasons. Do you know that? Now, Rebekah married the right man, but she married him for the wrong reason. See? And people do. And that's the reason I think that maybe the Hollywood stars, they get one, leave him, drop him, get another one, drop him, whatever, multiple marriages, that kind of thing. But that's not unusual. It's like the woman I heard about said she had 4 marriages. And somebody said, you got 4 marriages? She said 4. They said, well, who you married to? Well, said, I was married to a banker. She married to a banker? Yep. Then who was she married to? Said, I was married to the ringmaster of a circus. Said, a ringmaster. Said, that's right. Said, who'd you marry the 3rd time? She said, a preacher. And said, who'd you marry the 4th time? She said, undertaker. He said, how'd that work? She said, 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go. So it's kind of strange why people marry sometimes, isn't it? Well, it'd be bad, wouldn't it? But anyway, that was the story. Rebekah married the right man, but she married for the wrong reason. Now, even though she stuck with the marriage, I believe she probably was a thorn in Isaac's side. And she made a wimp, an absolute wimp, out of Jacob. You say he's a wimp? Man, I'm telling you, he was a wimp. You know what? These women have an intuition. And they know those kids. Now, you may not know them, but Mama does. And did you know what? After this deception takes place, so we'll talk about just a little bit here. But after the deception takes place, you know what Jacob's mother, Rebekah, said? Said, Jacob, you better run. And he did. Hey, real men don't run. Ain't that right? You especially don't run from your brother. I mean, stay and fight. Say you can't with him. I mean, sneak up behind him, do something, hide in the bushes. I mean, you got to do something, but you don't. How would you like to have the reputation of running for 20 years from your brother? But he did. See, now, I don't. The only thing I could go by is just what's written here, what I'm reading. And when it's time to get the birthright, Brother Bert dealt with that a little bit this morning. I don't know how much of a setup there had to be. There's not so much said about it. But when it's time for Jacob to go in and get the family inheritance, you know who set that up? He didn't think of that. His mother thought of it. And when Jacob brought Esau in and said, son, I want you to go to the field and get venison such as my soul loveth, and fix it that I may bless you before I die. And so while Esau has gone to the field, Rebekah gets Jacob and said, Jacob, I heard your father say. Well, really, probably wasn't any of her business. She probably just stayed out of that and let that be a father-son situation. But she said, I heard your father say. And said, here's what you need to do. You run to the herd and you get me a calf, young and tender, and I'll dress that calf. I'll fix that calf so that he'll think it's venison just like Esau fixes. And Jacob said, well, what if I seem to him as a deceiver? She said, let me take care of it. Thy judgment be upon me. She said, you just do as I'm telling you. And Jacob did exactly what his mother said and went in there, and at her recommendation, he lied to his father. Now, a woman that will tell her son how to lie in order to get ahead in this world, that's not a very good lady. That's not a good wife. That's not a good mother, but she did that. And I don't care what the commentators tell you about how great this woman was, buddy, I'm telling you, that was one of the most carnal-minded women that you've ever read about in all your Bible. She married for all that wealth. She married because here's a man, evidently prestige, also, reputation, whatever. She married for that reason. And then from there on, it looks to me like she ruled the roost. I know one thing, she wasn't afraid of Isaac. Listen, a woman that has submitted her husband would never dream of deceiving him like that and having her son to lie to him like that. She'd have been scared to death. He'd find out about it. She wasn't the least bit worried about it. Why? She run the show. She ruled the roost. Today, you hear a lot of preaching, a lot of teaching, and it's probably right, I guess so, about most of it's going to be how to treat your wife right, how to be good to your wife, how to be gentle to your wife, don't mistreat your wife. You probably leave that alone. She'll take care of that herself. She'll probably protect herself, not let you override her too much. She ain't going to let you abuse her, But you hear a lot of that. And I know, and that's exactly right. But, I think somewhere down the line, we ought to find out the woman's responsibility. Amen. Y'all okay? Before it's over, you quit bleeding. Amen. Amen. You say you hate women? No. I got as near a perfect woman as you ever saw. Her kids, ain't nobody. They never saw my wife do anything wrong. And you mistreat her? Well, I don't think so. She's got a checkbook in her car, goes to Walmart, does what she wants to. You can tell a woman 45 times a day that you love her, but if she has to swap that for liberty, she'd take the liberty. You give her a checkbook and the keys to the car, give her freedom, liberty, don't abuse her, she'll take that, because you can tell her you love her too. But you know who's running this nation? I tell you who's running it. It's women. Women run the nation. Now, if you're a good, godly woman and you're submitted to your husband and you love your children and you're following the Bible pattern, thank God for you. And most of you probably are. You probably are. And that's good. But I'm telling you, outside these four walls, buddy, there's a bunch of hellcats out there that their husbands would give anything in the world if they had have never, ever said, I do. I was at Walmart one day, and up there next to the jewelry counter, there's a guy who looked like he's about 300 pounds, and a little old woman, she wasn't big as nothing, but she had him up there fitting him for an earring. He had his head laying down there, she said, and I thought, man, life, boy. And I walk by those big guys every once in a while, I get their attention. I said, man, I come in here thinking about body slamming to somebody, but when I saw you, it changed my mind. I said, I don't feel good today. I'm going to let you off. And they'll laugh, and I broke the ice and give them gospel tracts in, tell them I'll tell you how to go to heaven when you die. Amen. But how would you like to be that wimpy character that's about 300 pounds standing there with a little woman holding him up there, fitting him for an earring? You don't believe that's society out there? That is society. That's exactly what's happening. I heard Dr. Dolphus Price tell one time an old story he used to tell. He said there was two friends standing on the street corner, and they looked across the street, and on the corner was a man drunk, and he's whipping up on a little woman about half his size. And the fellow said to his friend, he said, look there, let's go stop that. He said, no, let him alone. And he said, no, let's go stop it. He said, no, let's let him alone. He said, but he's going to beat her to death. He said, no, he won't hurt her. He said, I know him. I said, you know him? He said, yeah, it's a man and wife. It's a man and wife. Yeah, so let's stop it. He said, no, let it alone, because when he's not drunk, that's the way she does him. Amen. Yeah, you don't believe that's a problem in society? Yeah, that is a problem in society, friend. And so what am I saying? I'm saying, all right, here's what Rebecca did. She set it up for her boy to lie to his daddy. She set it up, and by the way, Rebecca knew those boys, because when she said Esau is mad enough, as soon as your daddy died, he's going to kill you, she knew he could do it, and she knew he would do it. And so she said, run. She was protecting her son, the one that she loved, over top of the other one. And he did run. She deceived her husband Isaac just as much as if she'd have done it all by herself, or that she hadn't been involved, just Isaac went in and done it. See? So what am I saying? I'm saying that when you read that story about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you read the demise of Jacob because of what his mother taught him. Now, when you flip that coin, I'll tell you what you'll find. You'll find, now I don't know who said it, but they said behind every great man is a great woman. You know, and there have been women in the past that men could have not done near what they did without the influence of a woman. When you read stories about Mrs. Spurgeon, you know what Miss Spurgeon was? She was the backbone of Charles Spurgeon. When you read stories about Susanna Wesley, you know what she did? She taught her children to read the Bible before they were 5 years old. And when you read the stories about those women, you know what those women did? Those women realized that they had a responsibility. And you know what the responsibility was? It was to be Mrs. So-and-so, and to help her husband, and to encourage her husband, and to support her husband. But when you leave that role of a wife, and you begin to take favoritism for your children, and you begin to deceive your husband, and you get in rebellion to him in order to get something for your favorite child, you stepped outside the will of God. Oh no, you're to be submissive to that husband. And like, you know, Mary said the other day, somebody asked her about raising our children, and how did she enforce discipline? Well, if she's home alone and I'm out during the day, and one of our children became unruly or whatever, they had to have some discipline. All she said was, I'll tell you, Father, when he comes home. That took care of it. That's all there was to it. And when she came and told me what happened, and I took care of it. That's the way it's supposed to be, you see. Now, what about the matter of women working? And I hit that pretty hard the other day. Listen, if you can be a submissive wife to your husband, and if you can raise your children in godly manner, whatever, and work and do it and not lose, fine. I'm not down on that. But I'm just saying that when you get your eyes on the bracelets and the earrings and the jewelry and the finery, when you get, I counseled a couple one time, went over, and I could see that little old bride sitting there on the floor with her legs crossed, crying, and her husband sitting up there snubbed up on the couch, and they was getting ready to split, and probably did. And what they split over was he had bought, I think, a Jaguar car, and he liked it so well that he was driving the Jaguar and making her drive a rusty pickup truck to work. And she said, you know, what a thing to split a home over, you know. But that's what happens. When you get you out in the world, we got to have a bigger house, we got to have more money, we got to have a bigger car, we got to have something. And you know what? Ladies, they like the jewelry, they like the finery, they like the clothes. No, be satisfied with a good husband and a conservative lifestyle, like, you know, we give to missions, and going to up it this year. But I live in a house 100 years old, you know. And my wife, if you had to move, she'd probably cry. She don't want to move. That's good enough. She'd drive the car with 150,000 miles on it. And so what's wrong with that? Nothing. She'd drive another 150,000 as long as we stay together, you know. but a conservative lifestyle. But when you get around that world and you're going to make some more, and you're going to make some more, and you're going to make some more, and you're going to make some more. You know what the end of that road is? The end of that road is heartache and sorrow and tragedy and broken homes. No. Why don't we just come back to the Bible way? Why don't we get back to the scriptures? And I believe God puts that, well, I know that he puts that in the Bible for our learning, for our admonition, that we through patience and hope, through the scripture, we find patience and hope. And there's the story. And so Rebekah was Jacob's downfall. She made a wimp out of him. Now Esau, I don't know how it happened, but Esau was loved by his father Jacob. Esau showed more respect for his father than Jacob did. Because when Esau determined that he was going to kill Jacob, he wasn't going to do it until his father died. He didn't want to bring that heartache and that hardship on his father, suffering the death of his son. So he wouldn't kill him until his father was gone. Jacob didn't care. You know who Jacob was like? Jacob was like his mama. He's just like his mother, Rebekah, and then snare. She knew how to set a trap. Amen. All right, well, couldn't read the verses, couldn't have see, but that's about all I could see to do. Amen. You know what, ladies? You got a world out there that's after you. They're after you. I watched a wedding the other day on a video. I cried when I watched it. When Trinity and Aaron got married. I was somewhere, I don't know, Carolina, I think, a hotel. And I got the video up and I watched it. And I thought, isn't that a beautiful wedding? Well, Trinity dressed right, looked right. Aaron, a good boy, man. And I thought, the church needs to see that kind of stuff a lot. They need to hear those wedding vows. Brother Dave Dennis did a fabulous job. I mean, it was just excellent all the way through. And that's what it ought to be. That'd be a good couple. They'll be all right. They'll be all right. But boy, when they're matter with that glitter and that gold, and it's a selfish ambition that they have. If I can get him, boy, I'll drive a Cadillac. You might. If I can get him, I can drive a Porsche. I can drive, yeah, you might. If I get him, boy, look at that jewelry. Look at all those clothes, yeah, you might. But let me say this to you, and then I'll be finished. I was in Andalusia, Alabama, and you heard stories like this 40, 50 years ago. You don't ever hear these anymore. Ed Ballou, an old Cherokee Indian preacher out of Tennessee, Georgia. Boy, Ed Ballou was rough. He was a rough preacher. But he was preaching revival in Andalusia, Alabama. He was Tim's favorite preacher back then. I liked him well enough to drive that far to hear him from Pensacola. And one day during the meeting, the phone rang at the parsonage, and the pastor, Wesley Hay, answered the phone. And the voice on the other end of the line said, is this the church where an evangelist, Ed Ballou, is preaching this week? And he said, it is. Would you like to speak to him? And he put Ed Ballou on the phone. And she said, Mr. Ballou, I heard you preach in Greenfield, Indiana, and told the year and the date. And said, that night you said, and she said, I was just in the congregation, but that night you said that you may be rich and you may be beautiful, but if you never are born again, you'll have to go to hell like any other sinner. She said, that's haunted me. That's haunted me. I've never been able to get away from it. And she said, you've heard of Senator Barry Goldwater? He said, yes, ma'am. And she said, I'm Jennifer, Barry Goldwater's daughter. And she said, I got a gun. I'm getting ready to blow my brains out. He said, ma'am, you're getting ready to get in more trouble than you've ever been in your life. And she said, for some reason, I can't get this diamond on my hand to glitter. And he led her to Christ over the phone. This world, it ain't worth it. I mean, it's going up in smoke. I mean, these automobiles, they're not worth it. These big houses, and I talk about Brother Kendrick's house. He built a house, and well, that's wonderful. A man ought to care for his children, his family, his wife, Give them the best you got. Ladies ought to adorn yourself and look decent and look good. Sure, but beauty's vain. A woman that feareth the Lord, she should be praised. You got a lot of power. The average woman, married man, what she has the ability to do, she can make him or break him. And Rebecca broke Isaac. She broke him. She ruined his boy. And God had to take drastic measures to turn him around. Now, he did it, but she ruined that boy. It'd take a lot of wisdom for you to be the right kind of a lady. And again, probably this church probably high on the average because of the preaching, the Bible studies. I very seldom give an invitation, but I'm going to this morning. I want to be some lady, if you've got the least bit of desire to manipulate your husband, something that he don't want to do. If you're trying to steer one child in a different direction than he wants them to go. If you got any of that worldly ambitions, and let's build a home. Let's build families. When I see those signs out there that said, home for sale, they're advertising an empty house. You can't buy a home if you can sell one. And a lot of people have sold their home for a potential American dream. I gave the illustration the last time I preached about Utica, New York. It became eventually, I didn't tell this part, but eventually, Utica became recognized as the textile capital of the world. And before that fame went out, over 2,500 women, this part I told, over 2,500 women working at night, going to work at 7 o'clock at night, getting off at 6 in the next morning. Took 1 hour at midnight for lunch or for supper meal. But later on it said, when it was recognized that Utica, New York was recognized as the textile capital of the world, it also gained the reputation of being Sin City. And they advertised Utica as the city that God had forgotten. He said, what were they doing? They run the textile industry and making money, but they broke the American home. Things haven't changed. Why don't we build homes? Joyful homes. My wife often says, no matter where we go or what we've done, she said, I like to go away. It gives me an opportunity to come home. And when we walk in, it's so peaceful, so joyful, just a wonderful place to be. You need help this morning. Let's build homes. You know what a church is made of? Strong homes. That's what a church is. That's the reason the church strengthens the homes. And when they do, you've got a strong church. Amen. Let's bow for prayer. Heads bowed and eyes closed. Live as comfortable as God will let you live. Make all the money God will let you make. Dress in as fine a clothing as God will provide for you. Eat good, do anything you want. You're at liberty. But don't do it at the expense of straining your home or straining your relationship with Jesus Christ. If you need to come to the altar, and I'm going to pray in a moment, then Jacob will come and finish the service. But if you need to come, ask God to give you wisdom, strength, help, and guidance, and being the wife or husband that you ought to be, you feel free to come.